Hello, everyone, and good morning. So today we've got the fourth presentation by David. This is the ups and downs on the careers. So obviously, I'd like to welcome David. And as usual, if you do have any questions throughout, please do add them to the Q&A section, the tab up there, and we will get back to all of you later on. So enjoy this one. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Toby. Yes, welcome to the fourth of my talks on the subject of careers. I'm David Leech. I'm Global HR Director of the RWS Group Intellectual Property Services Division. We're a leading provider of patent filing and translations, and the RWS Group as a whole is amongst the 200 top businesses on the FT Stock Exchange. We're actually listed on the AIM, not on the main exchange, but nevertheless we're in the top 200. And we're about, as a group, to become the #1 global language solution provider with the acquisition of our nearest rival, SDL, which should happen at the end of October, at which point we'll be even bigger. So when Henry was charming me into doing these sessions, I just agreed in a kind of egotistical way that I would talk about things. And then I began to realize I hadn't really got any clear goals. So in the end, I've got basically 4 goals. First is to provide information from my perspective about careers. Secondly, to provide some kind of know-how, how in other words, to deal with challenges and issues that might arise during your career. Thirdly, possibly the best and most important bit, to provide warnings. You know, what it's like, for example, once you start your job. The kind of warnings that I might have appreciated when I became a worker and a member of the beehive, and that nobody told me at the time. I'm not sure that it would necessarily help me a great deal in avoiding those pitfalls, but it would help me deal with them, I think, better. And finally, to provide encouragement. It's a time of a lot of doubt and uncertainty in our lives, and I think if you're young and looking towards a career, there can be many things to discourage you. But what I really want to provide is encouragement. And it struck me when I was listening to the radio the other day that a slightly weird encouragement is the discovery of a deposit of lithium in Cornwall. Now, why is that encouraging? Well, firstly, because it's in Cornwall. Secondly, because it will enable a regeneration in the mining industry in Cornwall. Cornwall having been an area of dominant in mining, apparently globally, for many years, but having been in decline for a very long time, and in need of some regeneration. But I'm thinking that kind of discovery and the opportunities it creates will bring work, jobs, and more careers to an area that's been suffering recently. So this is the last of my 4 sessions. Just briefly to encapsulate what I've covered so far. My first session, I covered my own survey of what I thought the key issues would be in the 21st century, based on the assertion that if you're aged 18 today, you have a 50% chance of living to 100. A situation I think brings the prospect of multiple careers rather than one career, and also means that the caring community will be at a premium, I think, as years go by. As our population ages, people still need caring. So there's careers in caring, and we need to think about, as a society, about how we value and appreciate those who get involved in caring activities. Secondly, the not so difficult thing to work out, the fact that green careers have become more and more dominant, although I feel that's potentially rather paradoxical, because the work in the green economy is about preservation and shrinkage, reducing our resource consumption rather than increasing it, which is sort of slightly strange when we talk about careers, because careers are often about growth and progression, and we're looking about improving the life that we live on this planet. But whether that's compatible with a growing career, I had some thoughts about. And then, of course, we have the inevitable issue of information technology. And there's no doubt that it will continue to be more and more dominant in our lives and more helpful. And people, even so-called experts like me, might be replaced by expert systems, which creates quite a challenge for the human side of work and careers. And I'm sort of, even as I stumble into things like Snapchat and so on, I hope there's something slightly more creative than that around the corner. I moved on to the second talk, which was about managing your own career. And That's about thinking about what you want, planning your career versus reacting to opportunities, being spontaneous, keeping your CV and resume up to date, being clear about what you can do and what your skills are, and how you might get support as you want to progress through your life and career. And the last talk was, before this one, was about the perspective from the employer, what employers look for, how they choose people, and what they expect once you've joined, and the deal between the employer and the employee. Does loyalty matter or not? I think I said I think it does matter up to a point, but you can't count on it. So it's back to looking after your employability. So now I want to look at the ups and downs of careers. But before I do that, just my usual health warning. As you can see, I'm a white male, middle-aged, private and Oxbridge educated person whose career has been spent, as you can't see this one, in international corporate businesses, with a brief divergence into the civil service, which, although it's not necessarily international, is still a corporate body. So the information I'll be providing you with comes from that perspective. Although I've done a bit of thinking about what careers might mean outside big organizations, my knowledge of what goes on is largely derived from knowledge of big organizations. However, that experience does include a pretty wide range of experiences across the economic cycle: boom and bust, growth and downsizing, mergers and acquisitions. And I've been in roles in retail banking, in sales, in marketing. My employers have included investment banks, major accountancy firms, major law firms, and a consultancy, in fact, major consultancy, Hitachi Consulting. Much of that time, obviously, I've been spending in human resources. When it comes to the ups and downs, I've been made redundant 3 times. I've been fired once, and I've been headhunted twice. So when I tell you about my interstellar career, you have to bear that in mind, that it's not been entirely plain sailing, although I have been promoted 5 times. And some of these things have been something that was a surprise to me. In fact, where I sit now is something that surprised to me as well, because I never really thought when I started thinking about my career that I would end up in human resources in a room in leafy Buckinghamshire talking to an audience of people who I can't see. What am I going to cover then in this talk? Well, there's what I'm calling promises. What's it about when you kick off a career, when somebody starts employing you? Then I want to talk a bit about coping with success, which would then lead us into the question of how leadership works in a career. Then the nitty gritty, life and how it gets in the way or how it helps. Bit of a talk about diversity. It's like a tricky area, that one, speaking as a white male, middle class male. Some stuff about personal resilience, and then, because I want to end on a positive note, what it feels like when it feels good. So let's just kick off by looking at what I've described as promises. So you've got the job. So I'm just filling with my my screen here, so I can actually see what I'm saying. So you've got the job. Now the brochure, when you were recruited or when you went to a graduate fair or some careers fair or something, promises you amazing things: great work, great colleagues, and great clients, and you expect it to be from day one. But the issue really is that it requires a tiny bit more than that. It requires a bit of patience, and also requires a degree of resilience, because you will find that if you're joining a corporate body, that there are plenty of other people who are going to be there to help you, possibly, but also perhaps to get in the way. And I could tell you the story of the guy who died and found his way to heaven, and was met by St. Peter, who said to him, John, we've got an interesting deal for you today. We just want to show you not just the option of going to heaven, but also what it might be like to go to hell. So, so John says, okay, fair enough. Let's have a look at it then. So St. Peter takes John to look at heaven. It looks rather wonderful. Music's playing, everyone's smiling and happy. The weather's great. It's all green and lovely and a bit verdant, but perhaps a bit dull. So John says to St. Peter, okay, thanks for showing me heaven. Can I have a quick look at hell? So St. Peter summons the devil. The devil comes along and takes John down below. And it's all a bit more fun, a bit more hardcore. There's music, really loud music playing, dancing, all kinds of excess going on, excitement, noise, and a sense of thrilling activity. So the devil then takes John back to St. Peter and they have a bit of a chat about it. And in the end, John says, well, you know what? I've been thinking about it. I think I'll try hell. So St. Peter says, okay, off you go then. So anyway, the time passes, a few months pass, and the devil decides to do a bit of a walk around his domain, a bit of managing by walking about, because he's the CEO of hell. And he comes across John, and John is there with his head in a bucket of muck, being tormented by demons. The devil interrupts the demons and gets John out of the bucket of muck and says to him, how are you finding it? And he said, well, it's not really what I was expecting. I thought it would be a lot more fun. And the devil sighs and looks at him and said, you know, John, when I showed you all that stuff before, we were recruiting. Now you're going to face it. Now you're staff. And I think that's kind of the feeling you might have when you start your job. All the excitement of your promises seem to evaporate, and you have to actually learn stuff and do your job. And learning is a key thing. I think the experience I've had as a recruiter over the years is that people are perhaps impatient, especially when they're younger. So when I was younger, I was impatient. I thought I knew a lot, or that I could get a lot done in a short space of time. And I got very impatient with these old people of my age now, telling me to go a bit more slowly. But there's undoubtedly a risk of going too fast. And I've had many colleagues over the years who told me that they're now working for a boss who doesn't know stuff. And if you move too fast and push too hard without knowing stuff, you get to a point where perhaps you're found out, and when you can't necessarily do things, people might remove you, or you might find that people don't stick around with you. And if you don't know things, you might have to find ways of, as it were, cheating. I once found myself in a role as an interim job with a mining business, and I asked a senior lawyer, about a piece of information, something that was going on in the business, and he said, well, I don't know that. I said, how come you don't know that? You've been here 15 years. He said, I know. I never found out, and now I'm too embarrassed to ask. And that's the kind of thing that you need to be careful of in work. So it's basically, dare I say it, the very, very boring and uninspiring news that you have to be patient and you have to learn. You have to do some of the work. And all those old people who tell you that it's a good idea, they say, I'm another one of them. But as your career progresses, you do get success. You do get promotions. You do get rewards. You get bonuses. People do good things for you. They give you plenty of stuff to do. And I guess the thing here again, another uninspiring virtue that you probably need to demonstrate is humility. You get new jobs, new roles, new opportunities through doing good stuff, but you don't do this in a vacuum. And many people who get promoted past will have done something that will have helped you, and you might find yourself managing your friends, which can be quite tough. And so the whole thing, I think, needs a degree of humility, being prepared to understand that a promotion doesn't make you perfect. And I'm going to say this several times, and that power and influence are not somehow yours as of right. You have to have earned them, and you have to use them wisely, and as I would say, with humility. It's the same with expertise. These things don't confer perfection, and as you advance, you do need to be sure that you keep your ears and eyes open to what people are advising you to do and what to think about. It's sometimes very difficult to take people's advice when it means moving away from what you wanted to do. Way back, I launched a system which I was very proud when I was at Lloyds Bank, which was an assessment system for people's potential. I had this wonderful idea of a grand launch and a big roadshow and so on. And I now remember sitting in a room with a number of senior guys who I was expecting to provide me with the resources. And they very, very gently explained to me that there were no resources and the person who would be doing all the work was me. And I can remember to this day the intense sense of frustration and anger that I experienced by having determined something that could not happen. Fortunately to say, they were very kind and they actually thought I was quite a good guy. So explained to me very, very, very patiently and kindly how it might work. And they helped me think of another way of doing things. But as a guy who was in a hurry, thought he was doing brilliantly, it was a lesson in patience and humility. But this, of course, leads us on to leadership, another up or a down in a career. There will come a point in most careers where you get good enough to be considered for a supervisory role or a management role. And in the last couple of sessions, I've talked about this a bit, and I said you really want to decide whether you want to be a leader or not. Now, leadership brings more money, it brings a degree of power. It brings the fact that people actually do what you ask, at least at some of the time. But you again, it's an issue that brings with it also lots of responsibility, many demands, many stresses and strains, and you really got to be ready for it. And I think this is a thing that we don't necessarily deal with too much. Often you get promoted to a position of leadership having been really, really good at your technical job, and the amount of preparation you have emotionally as well as into skills terms is not necessarily as much as it should be. And as far as I know, I've never come across any training around how to deal with the frustrations of why people don't necessarily do what you want to do. You just have to learn kind of on the job, or maybe get your mentor or your boss to advise you on how to deal with these things. But nevertheless, it is in many respects very satisfying. Now, the other thing that I think we'll also think about here is what is it like to be led? I call it followership. It's thinking about being a good follower. A good follower can become a good leader, but followers often will follow subject to certain unspoken issues. That, in other words, they won't follow you without question, and they won't follow you blindly. And many of the times they will ask for they will tell you what they need from you. For example, clarity. People love clarity. I find clarity a very difficult issue, and you often find that clarity is a thing that people want until they get it, at which point they discover they don't quite like it. I told you the anecdote last time of my daughter, who became a head girl at her school, and when I asked her afterwards what it was like, she said, "People are not necessarily quite as nice as they pretend." That reminds me of a story I heard about one of my colleagues, Mike, who got a new job in an engineering business, and in his desk on his first day, he found a couple of 3 envelopes left there by his predecessor, and the first envelope was for your first mistake. It was labeled for your first mistake, and inevitably his first mistake occurred, and he opened the envelope, and inside was a note saying, "Blame your predecessor." So he did. He blamed his predecessor. He threw that envelope away and saw the second one said, "For your second mistake." Well, a few months later, his second mistake arose, and there's lots of stuff going on. He opened the envelope, and the advice was, "Fire your subordinate." So he fired a subordinate. All went well, and noticed there's a third envelope for your third mistake. Things went along quite well. A year and a half later, another mistake occurred. He was really, really deep trouble. Didn't know what to do. Okay, I'll open the envelope. Opened the envelope, and inside it said, "Prepare 3 envelopes." Now, so that is the downside of leadership, is that you take on responsibility, and if things go wrong, it comes back to haunt you. So again, as I say, it's about resilience and having some kind of faith in yourself. But that's about work. There's the issue of life outside of work. Or indeed, potentially, if you lose your job, how does that help? Losing your job, it's happened to me several times, can be very disruptive, and disruptive is perhaps something of an understatement. The first time it happened to me, it was extremely alarming. I had to phone up from a holiday, from a phone box in the middle of Ireland where I'd taken my family, to find that as a result of restructure within the organisation, my job had gone, and I was going to go through a redundancy process. I was very lucky. On the way up, I'd made friends with lots of people, and so they helped me out, got me some good outplacement, and that led to a brilliant new job. And my good fortune is that every time I've been made redundant, and the one time I was fired, I've got a better job than the one I left. This might not always happen, but I guess one thing is to give you the good, encouraging news that redundancy or losing a job is not the end of the world. And if you didn't do well in one place, you may well do well in another. There are very, very few people who do badly all the time. Then there's the question of money. Even if you keep your job, don't make too many changes and so on. It's quite easy for money to get out of control. You might start having a family, you might need a house, you might be getting into debt, and so on and so forth. My advice to you here is try to avoid all of those things if you possibly can. It's very, very difficult in the modern world to avoid that, and not to spend quite a lot of your time worried about your mortgage, whether you're going to be securely accommodated. A lot of basics get in the way when you're looking to plan and develop your career. And it's best to deal with these things so they don't distract you. So don't lie awake at night wondering about whether you'll lose your job and therefore whether you'll lose your house. there are then issues around your family. The model, the Western model of husband, wife, two children, one working, one not working, does prevail to a large extent still. But what happens more and more is that you have two career families, and I've been talking recently to some of my friends who've got situations where one partner has expectations of support which the other partner doesn't necessarily buy into, particularly if say the dominant partner, so to speak, is doing something that is philanthropic, which is highly regarded. Let's say it's in something to do with human rights or something of that sort. Because something is admired, it's a kind of expectation that the support will come from unquestioningly from the other partners. And this can be very problematic in relationships, especially if you might have children as well. And it does involve, I think, a lot of negotiation and patience and mutual support. Otherwise, one person might ride to glory and the other person might be overwhelmed with drudgery. It's a key thing, I think, to bear in mind. Anyway, that's a brief summary of life. We'll go back to a couple of things about life in a minute in the connection with personal resilience. Let's just talk a bit about diversity. Diversity, by which I really mean people from non-white, non-male, non-middle class, non-Oxbridge backgrounds moving forwards in their careers. Now, I'm a child of the 60s. I was born in 1961. I grew up in the 1970s at a time of what's basically casual racism, casual sexism, casual homophobia. In those days, things I think moved very slowly. Now I think we're seeing things move more quickly. But there is no doubt that there are plenty of things that are still getting in the way of a truly diverse business or career context. There are many helpful resources now that there weren't there before. Mentors, networks, sponsorship by business. RWS, my employer, sponsors a number of schools which have specialized in languages, but which are in areas of some deprivation. And so our intention is to encourage people from those deprived areas to think about careers in languages and in patterns. It's fairly early stages, so we don't really know if this will work. But the glacier has been moving. But I think there's a lot of again, back to patience. A lot of patience and a lot of persistence is needed. And as somebody said at one of my earlier talks, it's still the fact that if you are not a white male like me, you really have to be really, really good to be sure that you can progress. That can be very, very frustrating. But all I would observe really is that things are moving forward. And actually, as we see things moving forward, impatience grows. I think things will move forward faster and faster in the years to come. So let me turn back now to what life getting in the way. I think really it's about personal resilience. So it's making sure you look after your health. Too much late night celebration when you're young, although of course we're not going to get any of that at the moment with the coronavirus, can't be terribly good. But that's hard to resist. I owe this face to some of that carousing in my 20s. So it is about looking after your health, playing sport, staying healthy, exercising in some way, eating well. It's about continuing to learn to love learning. Learning, I think, is a source of tremendous personal resilience and strength. If you know stuff, if you know how to do things, then it enables you to be more confident and much better in the world of work. And as I said already, it's about reflecting on your skills. What can you offer? What have you done? What actions have you taken which have made a difference? All of these things can bolster up your confidence and make you feel good at times of difficulty. Well, I'd say they do for me. I don't exactly rewrite my CV every time I have a row with my wife, but I do find that reflecting from time to time on what I've accomplished is a means of helping me feel good about what I've done and what I can do. Also, however, I think you have to think about whether for you in work and in careers, it's about the outcome that you're aiming for or the journey that you're on. The great result can call for drudgery. So having talked to you about what's in the brochure offers lots of excitement and great work. Sometimes though, great accomplishments don't need great work. They just need a lot of heavy lifting, as they call it, a lot of drudgery and hard work, going in day in, day out, and laboring, but with the goal in mind. You have to remind yourself of that goal a lot. And think about where your satisfactions come from. Do they come from the work itself? Do they come from the goal? If they come from both, that's wonderful. Sometimes uh, the goal can be achieved only through a lot of hard labor, and as long as as long as you're prepared to do that, it's wonderful. On the other hand, you can sometimes do a lot of great work to find the outcome isn't all that good, which is also rather disappointing. But the best thing is obviously to have the combination of interesting work with an interesting goal at the end of it. You can't always have that, but that's the nirvana I'd be aiming for. So finally, let's just talk about when it feels good. What are the kind of things that actually make it feel good in a career? For me, obviously, getting a job and feeling that somebody wants you is a really good moment. Getting that job done well is another big part of it. So achievement for me, I will tolerate the drudgery because I can see some achievements ahead of me, some things that make a positive difference. Sometimes these achievements come by accident. One time I decided that I didn't have enough knowledge from the branches of the business I was working with. So I sent them all a document asking them to fill out information on their people resources ahead of a visit by me. So by the time I got to the visits and they completed their forms, they actually knew more about their own businesses and their own people resources than I did. And they realized that they had more that they could manage and manipulate and work with than they'd ever thought. And this was a transformation in terms of their sense of power and influence over their business. And number one of them said, "I never realized how much there was I could manage, David." This is an unintendedly positive outcome. I've spent quite a lot of my career since trying to replicate it. I think I haven't really achieved in terms of that process, but whenever I can, I try to give people a sense of their own power and influence. So it's about achievement. It's also sometimes about the people, being part of a successful team, being the leader of a team, being part of a bigger successful group, feeling good about all of those things, supporting other people and helping them through crisis, helping them through to success. That has been for me a fantastic source of satisfaction. Sometimes, though, it's just about other people being grateful. In my current job, I write a crisis-related Friday email to all the staff. I tell them what's going on, tell them where we've come from and where we're going. And bit by bit, I get nice emails back from people expressing gratitude for keeping them in the picture. This is at a time of crisis, and many people are hoping that I will continue this approach once the crisis is over, if it ever ends. So that in summary is my view of the ups and downs of a career. And as I say, there are many satisfactions, but there are many kind of pitfalls on the way. It's coping effectively with the pitfalls, and it's enjoying the satisfactions. And on that note, I'll go back to Toby, and we can maybe have a few questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David. I really like the idea of sort of personal resilience, especially at the moment. It seems to me that the idea of learning, continuing to learn, is an opportunity to do that, given that we can't, there's a lot of limitations on what we can and can't do. So that as an idea of, because reassuring yourself, I suppose, is quite powerful, really. So we do have some questions, which are brilliant. So I'll start at the top. So it says, given the current global situation, is there a way to best prepare yourself for few ups and many downs?
Clearly, I would not advocate substance abuse.
No.
But I think there are many resources that you can draw on. I thought that it seems uninspiring in a way always to refer to getting support from your friends, but we are a social animal, and friends, colleagues, family, mentors can all be there to help you. And again, I'll give you a great example. The Friday email that I described, which I do every Friday, is quite stressful because I have to try and find something to say.
Yeah.
And I've got other work, and I'm trying to hit a deadline. But one of my colleagues, at least one of my colleagues, I'm probably one, two, or three, in fact, do take the trouble to phone me up and just give me a few sort of kind words. And essentially, it's just social chit chat. But those things just lift your nose from the grindstone and help you realize there's a kind of prize out there that's worth working for. Yeah. So there's human support. Then there are those things that are about, as it were, what you do in the solitude of your own time. And I think mindfulness and things like meditation and so on are all worth um, going for as well. I think a lot of what I've said here has been about sort of, as it were, relentless action and
Mm,
activity, and sometimes it's about finding a calm space to
mm,
contemplate how things are, maybe to perhaps empty your head of thoughts and empty your body of kind of feelings and try to just be calm.
mm,
Again, I would also say, physical activity, health and fitness. I should do a run more often than I do. I run once a week. I try to do at least 4 kilometers. And by about the second kilometer, I'm really struggling.
mm,
And there's nothing better for clearing your mind of all worries than trying to get to the end of a 4 kilometer run with 2 kilometers to go,
mm,
feeling like death and with your left foot hurting and your back aching and what have you.
yeah.
Okay, 4 kilometers, not very long, it's not a marathon. But uh, that that experience of physically getting towards the end of a run and then trying to recover,
Yeah.
that you kind of focus on relatively narrow but actually quite calming things.
I suppose
Um,
it's a present challenge which puts everything else
yes,
into perspective,
that's
kind of thing.
that's
Yeah.
that's exactly right. That's so. Um, and I hope I'm giving the impression that my life has been one long disaster because I'm sitting in a position of some eminence. Um, but I guess another thing that I've done is I support West Ham United, who are not that successful. They're quite successful, not very successful. Which is always a kind of uh, on the one, it's wonderful when they do well, and you get accustomed to them not doing well. Um, and those kind of interests sort of put things into perspective, I think.
Yeah. Prepare you. Excellent. Um, Great. And I suppose another one which kind of leads on from this is a question: how do I prepare myself if I'm very success or goal driven specifically? So I suppose talking about what you mentioned about sometimes you do just have to do the work,
Yeah.
and if you're very orientated towards just the goal or the outcome, how do you best sort of prepare yourself?
Well, I I think one of the observations I've made about kind of the drudgery, which I kind of got rather into a loop about that word, is you don't necessarily realize until you're doing it that it is drudgery. So you set off. I'm one for great enthusiasm. I set off on some great goal, and I realize once I've committed to it that I've probably bitten off more than I can chew, and there's stuff that I'm doing that I'm not necessarily enjoying, or which I'm not doing very well. So it's a constant reminder. It's you would have thought that after 30 odd years of work, I would have learned to be a bit more circumspect. Um, but what I've really done is I've learned to find ways of getting resources to help me, and that's an important thing. It is perfectly reasonable to ask for help. That again, asking for help doesn't mean that you abdicate responsibility or that you dump things on people. But people may well be willing to help you because they may be in different stages of their lives and their career, and they may find a thing that you're not that good at or you're not that keen on very, very attractive.
Yeah.
I have a member of my team. We've just had to write some guidelines because we're transferring our structures from paying overtime, paying money for overtime, to giving people time off in lieu of overtime. So you essentially a bit like flexi time. And I don't really like writing guidelines. I've done them, but I don't write them. But a member of my team loves them, and she does them very quickly. And so I've been able to, without any grief, ask her to do that piece of work, and she's done it very well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so part of the issue is just recognition, knowing yourself,
Yeah.
and kind of preparing, thinking about, well, what will this demand for you? I
Yeah.
think again, my if I was a bit more thoughtful, I might have had a totally different career. But I've done a lot of plunging into things and found that
Mm.
they've kind of worked out. But
A bit
I
of
have
trial by
many,
fire.
yeah, yeah, and every time it sort of goes slightly wrong, nearly goes wrong, you nearly get away with it. I mean, it's kind of when you get away with it, it's kind of thrilling.
Mm.
Um, but what I've observed is that those who use a sporting metaphor, give themselves time on the ball and look at what they're doing, think about how they're going to do it. So do some planning in terms of their approach to things. Do well, and there are people like me. The world divides lots of different types of people. People like me kind of charge into things and then sort of have to dance and uh, uh, duck and dive to get the
Yeah.
outcome because of what you've bitten off. But I can't entirely reassure you, but I think a bit of thoughtfulness always goes a long way.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
wish I'd learned it 40 years on.
yeah, the thing of knowing yourself is kind of quite, I suppose, quite relevant to the mindfulness stuff as well. And
Yeah.
it's not easily attained necessarily, but it's brilliant if people can do it well and know a bit. I mean, clearly you know yourself now. It might not be have helped, years ago when you took these plunges, but you clearly are more aware now and able
Well,
to
yeah,
recognize it.
yes, that's true. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So brilliant. So we've got another nice one actually, which is useful for myself as well. Do you have any recommendations for learning resources or approaches to continued learning?
I've found in my current job, which I've been doing 2.5 years now, that there's an enormous amount of information online. Let's say I don't know. Let's say something that sounds a bit dull, like business continuity or export finance. But my daughter did an internship recently. She had to write an article for her online employer on export finance. She said she found quite boring. Or the article was quite nice. And my landlord, who actually had worked in export finance, says there's nothing more important, nothing more interesting. So you can find esoteric information on esoteric subjects online in enormous abundance. The challenge for you in that information is to determine, you have to look at things quite critically, is to determine whether it's good or bad. Um, I've been preparing a process to induct new managers, to help managers think about leadership and management. And if you put in something like leadership and management, let's say the top 10 attributes of a leader, you will find the top 200, no problem. And what I've realized as I've done my ferreting through Google is that a lot of it is utter rubbish, and it exists to market a product of some description or another, and it's written by people who don't really know what they're talking about. Now so it's you must be very discriminating, I think, in terms of what's online. And I haven't got it with me now, but the other thing is that there's a lot of books are written by very bona fide people, and I talked about the 100-Year Life at the very outset of this series of talks and this morning, and if you look at this book, The 100-Year Life, written by Linda Grattan and a colleague, Linda Grattan is a very good source of thinking around management issues, and I'd also recommend to you a book called How to Lead Smart People by my friends. I can't say it's entirely disinterested, but it's by a guy called Mike Mister. And there are people who have developed quite good reputations for their writing, and there's certain gurus that are quite good as well. I quite like Simon Sinek, for example. And they're again speakers man whose pictures now on YouTube. I would also recommend YouTube. There's I can't remember his name now, but there's a guy who does a wonderful story about how to run a nuclear submarine. If you were to put into YouTube, running a nuclear submarine, you'll find a really, really good thing about leadership and management. So it kind of depends what might suit you as well. I think that's a combination of reading and online can be very helpful. And if you can find a mentor, I mean, a lot of this festival is about getting mentors, getting connected with mentors. If the chemistry is good, the conversations will teach you stuff in a very easy and enjoyable way.
Well, perfectly leading on from this, Bernard has added an old person's comment, which is his words, not mine. Um, I can always ask myself what I have learned, whatever the experience, which I suppose is the other end of that as well. Of that you learn a lot through experience, both good and bad.
Yeah,
Um, and that, yeah, I mean, continuing to learn, I suppose, independently is very important as well. And as you were talking about, the more having the passion for learning and being willing to learn is sort of is vital. But
yeah.
yeah, you learn a lot through good and bad experiences. So
I
interesting as
think I
well.
think I suppose I would probably add. I think
Mm,
that old person's comment is always quite important because um, you do hear people say, "Well, I've learned a lot
mm,
about from my experience with another." And I was going to say, well, could you be a bit more specific? Having learned a
mm,
lot, it sounds a bit sort of glib. So
mm,
being able to specify, as Brandon said, kind of what the learning actually has been
mm,
is quite important because that then becomes a little tool that goes in your knapsack, and
yeah.
you can draw on it if you're clear about what it is.
I suppose I find, for me, I relate a lot to that under the idea of framing the question, which I suppose comes to me for the idea of, like, using the internet as a resource. But through university for myself, it's how do you frame the question? Because the internet's out there and it's full. There's so much stuff out there.
Yes,
But framing that question, being specific, I suppose, is the
I think
bullet
I think
point.
that's a great point because you can what you discover is that English is a very rich and but ambiguous language. You put certain
Mm,
things into Google, you get an answer you just didn't expect. I'm
mm,
trying to think of what something happened to me the other day. I put in the phrase, I can't remember what it was, but I got a
mm.
totally perverse set of
Yeah,
responses.
yeah, no, you do, you do. Brilliant. So we've got a couple more to get through. So the first one is, what is the best way to deal with a boss that isn't so good? I know people who have bosses that regularly yell at their staff, which doesn't seem acceptable to me.
Well, very, very common advice
Mm,
is um, you can't change your boss. You might be able to change yourself to adapt to your boss. You can't
mm,
change your boss. So there's a choice about essentially either you endure that situation or you move on. Now, I've had that situation happen to me, and it started off kind of quite well, but then I realised that my boss was a jerk,
mm,
and had created had been brilliant in his way and had got to a senior position, but created a kind of climate of fear.
mm,
And this was very, very difficult because I was, as kind of senior person myself, I was kind of almost being asked to collude with that.
mm,
And it the analogy actually would almost be like Harvey Weinstein, where the bad behavior was being indulged, and
mm,
um, this indulgence went on. So it wasn't just me. So everybody indulged this behavior, and I'd actually got to a point where I thought I probably would leave, but to my relief, because I've been doing quite well, and I was able to do well enough without him noticing, or at least him being able to get in the way, and I had about enough sort of experience and resilience to get through. But to my intense relief, he resigned. Um,
mm,
so it's to some extent it's difficult, but if you have no confidence that the person will change, then it's either endure it or it's get out.
mm. Yeah. And and as a final question here, which I suppose is around the the promotion stuff that you're talking about, is it okay to ask for a raise? And if so, what's the best way to do this?
It is okay to ask for a raise. It kind of depends on the organization that you're in. Some
Mm,
organizations will be very rigid and say here's an annual pay review, that's it. Others are
mhm,
prepared, will have a culture where you have to ask for it anyway.
mm,
Um, so I don't think there's any particular problem. What's the best way of doing it? Well, I guess it's to do loads of good things and build up a track record of being really good,
mm,
and maybe also find out what your worth is in the market outside, and
mm,
um, also consider what you will also understand what the economics are of your organization,
mm,
because it may not help You might be it's never like that welcome if you ask for a raise. The other thing I would tend to do is not threaten to leave. Um, you know, if you start looking outside and giving threats to your bosses that you'll leave unless you get a pay rise, the contract, the relationship between you is damaged, and it may not work. I mean, the one was at Ernst and Young. What would happen in these kind of areas was someone would resign to move to another job, probably paid better, and at once that person would be taken out for lunch, the best lunch ever, and that would be enough to persuade the individual to stick around for 3 to 6 months more, and they would leave anyway because nothing else changed. So the other issue is a combination of improving conditions. You're different from pay, admittedly, but pay might be part of it, and also what your commitment is to being better. It's not about I will work harder. It's just being sure that the value that you bring is understood. But certainly, I think it's in terms of timing, it's probably about after doing good work over a sustained period. But in one sense, you know, there is no good time because the boss doesn't necessarily want to hear it, and it's also possible that the boss may well have something planned for you, which is positive, and so it will kind of slightly take the energy out of a good thing. But so it's quite tricky to think about how you might do that and negotiate a pay rise. But say many organisations will just say, sorry, it's an annual process. Yeah. Stay patient.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, David, and thank you guys all for listening. Obviously, really interesting as usual, and loads of experience and information to glean from this. So, you know, thank you. And obviously, this is the end of the 4 careers talks which we've had. So that's great. We're at time now, so there's going to be a 15-minute break, and then we'll begin with the workshop at 9 a.m. British Summer Time.
Okay. All right. We'll see you then.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David. Cheers, guys. Thank you all. Bye-bye.